when I became interested in such things, it was the late 50s, early 60s. I was very young, and to go outside of Christianity was a heresy. There were very few books, but in the library you could find all sorts of things about spirituality, philosophy, all sorts of kinds of Christianity, which I tried a bit of. I'd read anything, particularly things about psychic things interested me, drew me. And I was very interested in what death was. So I wanted to know what death was and what happened to you. An uncle died, a grandmother died, and I wanted to know where they were. So that was a sort of searching going on. And also, this might sound a bit strange, but I used to have these dreams, very important dreams I had, which influenced me. And then I read a book by somebody in America who had age regressed somebody under hypnosis. I was about 12 years old when I read that book. And when you're 12, you read everything you believe. You read everything you read, you believe, right? And it said in that book that he age regressed this woman, and she remembered a previous existence. And I thought, a previous life? You can have a previous life? That's brilliant. I'd never heard that before. Nobody told me that. So I was really interested in that and got to try and find out about that. But it didn't matter who I asked, nobody knew the answer. So more and more books, more and more reading more and more books. And eventually somebody gave me a book on Buddhism. And the Buddha said that you can do it for yourself and you can find out what life is, birth and death, and karma came into it. Your actions relate to what happens to you. So I thought that's a very good idea. So I was really hooked from that point on. I mean, over the years, I drifted away looking at different things, and it took many years. And as a teenager, I was just a normal teenager with my friends. But if I ever said to somebody my interest, and I'm interested, started to become interested in Buddhism, they looked at me absolutely, a glaze would come over their eyes. I met somebody in a bookshop, I was buying a book, or very few books for sale. And there was a clergyman in the queue, and he said why I was buying this book and what strange things people were reading. Anyway, so it was just absolutely heresy, really. And it was not until the Beatles, the Beatles came along in the 60s, the swinging 60s in Britain was very strong. People were doing all sorts of things. And it was at that time it became all right but still, for many years, I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. But during that time, I went to the Buddhist Society. There was only one in Britain. It was called the Buddhist Society in London. That was started in 1924. They held a class for people who didn't know anything about it. And that was really the first time I ever met a Buddhist. They had residential summer schools every year, for a 10-day summer school every year, which I started to attend to. Any form of Buddhism They would come in, give talks, give meditations. And really that for me was the perfect way. I never got stuck in a group, never got stuck in a particular form of Buddhism. Well, at the beginning, when I used to go to these summer schools, everybody I spoke to was important. My feeling was at that time that you couldn't be English and be a teacher. You had to be Thai or Japanese or some kind of mystery around it. There was somebody called Duruvamsa. He was a Thai who used to teach meditation, and he was the first retreat I ever went to. There was an Indian lived in London, a Parsi he was from Gujarat, but he had an English wife. He lived in London, and he used to hold meetings once a month in his house for about 50 people. You could go to his house, and he knew practically every religion that there was. But he would talk about pre-Buddhism and Buddhism, and he was magnificent. And went to his house for on and off for about 14 years. An Englishman called Trevor Leggett, who was he's written several books, particularly on Zen. I would have been keen to be his student, but as he said, I do not take students, a bit like your friend. But I couldn't really understand Zen, but then there was Ajahn Sumedho came along, an American monk. You've probably heard of him. And I used to go to his retreats. They were 10-day retreats. But he was, and still is, still in contact with Ajahn Sumedho, and he's been an incredibly wise teacher. So I've got a lot to thank him for. But there was also a Zen Roshi used to come to this country once a year. His name was Soko Morinaga Roshi, and he was a Rinzai monk. He died a few years ago, but he for 6 years he came. It just blew my mind, to be honest. And it was slightly different to the Theravada style, but it was only at that point that I had an interest in Zen. Before that, I thought it was total rubbish. You don't need somebody to call themselves a teacher. People have their own wisdom, and it can be found anywhere. So everybody really is, you can say, is a teacher. In the Theravada, first and foremost, the texts were significant, and the Satipatthana Sutta, because it was about the meditation, the Pali Canon texts. But all of those suttas, if you read them, they're a bit laborious, very repetitive. They all actually relate to meditation, all the texts. In the Zen, they have their own body of texts. They've got the Lotus Sutra, the Prajnaparamita, the Wisdom Sutras, which I'm particularly interested in. And I read them as a meditation. So I think just to read them is pointless, but to read them as something to practice, I think is extremely valuable. I've mentioned the summer schools once a year. There was the Thai temple in London that we lived very close to. We moved to be close to, Richard and I, which we visited regularly. I would meditate at home. Gaia House when we came to live in Totnes. When we came down here, it's because we got invited into a Buddhist community, which is the Shopham House. And there was a living community that lived there, and we were invited to join that community. So we came to live there in that community. We lived there for 4 years. And there was, every day was 2 sessions of 1 hour, sessions of meditation. And we had retreats throughout the year at that place. So there's a lot of meditation there. And that was very important. And then we opened our own Golden Buddha Center on Dartmoor and then in Totnes, where we held retreats ourselves. But we didn't run the retreats, we always got other people. Through letting go of the habit, my habit patterns, through letting go of sticking to one form of practice. Otherwise, it becomes a ritual, I discovered. I realized that I was doing a lot of meditation, but nothing was, the concentration was strong, but that's all. And I realized that concentration, and the texts tell you this, of course, is not meditation. So that realization brings a more open awareness, and it's through awareness, being completely open, that the practice naturally evolves. Or it's no longer a practice as such, it's just watching events unfold. And not coming to any conclusion about, I know now, I'm wise now, or those kind of things. It used to be for most years, many years, a particular time during the morning or in the evening. But now it tends to be at any moment. Because we've got this centre going in Totnes, there are times when we go there and there are practices there. But I can honestly say it's a constant. But I do think a formal retreat is extremely valuable. So whenever I get the opportunity to do a retreat, I would do them. And it was one of the reasons we opened that centre in Totnes, because we invited teachers to come, and then I could do the retreat. I think retreats are very important with other people, or just at the moment, you know, where just a group of people sit for a period of time. That's concentrated. Sometimes I will sit alone, but it's not structured in the way it used to be. At the end of the meditation, I'd just been dreaming the whole time. The sitting, I was determined to sit in, I couldn't do a full lotus, but I did half lotus. And that was important to me at a certain age. I wanted to sit correctly. And I thought, and to be honest, I think if you do sit in a certain position, it does make you more awake, as it were, more attentive. But really the difficulty was thinking I had to create something, you know, that I had a goal, I had to achieve something. The self, the idea of a self doing it was always present. So I realized that the biggest problem was thinking I knew what was at the end, instead of being open to observing what was actually present. So there was always difficulties, but the difficulties changed in terms of what I understood it to be. Okay. The joy of letting go of all concepts, all techniques, but maybe still sitting in formal meditation. It doesn't have to be formal meditation. It can be at any time during the day. That I think there's somewhere along the line we make a leap from thinking we have to think everything, else it's not real, or we don't understand it, and realizing that we know something without thinking. You could say it's like an iceberg. There's a tip of the iceberg, and the thoughts are like the little tip, but the awareness is massive underneath, but we ignore it. As soon as we can let go of our self-identity, my name, what I am, my age, which is at one time I thought I was too young. Now I think I'm too old. If we let that go, we'll be lost, completely lost in space. But if we can do that, that is the greatest liberation and the greatest joy. Once, even if it happens just once, we know it, and it can affect our entire lives. But the other difficulty then is trying to repeat a particular experience, because then we're back into the same old trying to create something. I mean, two things are the dangers. There's one thing if people have mental illness, concentration can lead them into that illness. For most of us, the difficulty is saying, I am a Buddhist, this is my practice, I am much wiser than you, you're just an ordinary worldly person. That's the biggest danger, thinking you're special, thinking your practice is special, thinking your teacher is the only teacher. The truth, whatever era, whether it's thousands of years ago, whether it's now, it's still the truth. And we can think we're refining it, we can think we're making it better, but that's a terrible arrogance. It's a terrible arrogance that we have. To stay where we are, I define it as realizing that if there's a state of inner unrest or misery, there's another way. And so I have the choice. I can either feed the misery or I can see it for what it is. And then it's a sort of distance then. It's a sort of distance. And it's taking place, but I'm not suffering it. So we can have a lot of pain, physical pain, we can have a lot of terrible things happen, but it can be, it's taking place, we don't deny it, but we don't get involved to the point of feeding it and enlarging it. So that to me defines what meditation is a bit. No difficulties, because whatever comes up has to be recognized. So if, for instance, we've sat there for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then we say, oh, I just was dreaming the whole time, and then there's a sense of frustration. I'm no good, I'm not good enough, I must work harder. That's all untrue. It doesn't matter. You can't do it wrong. You cannot do it wrong. Because at the end of the sitting, you can say, I'll put my energy into that. We can ask ourselves, do I want to go back into that habit pattern? Or do I want to, am I fed up with myself? All ideas of myself and what I'm capable of, just let it go.